Hi and welcome to today's security session by WhiteLint Global. Thank you at the onset for sparing some time for your security needs, for hearing us out. Because WhiteLint and our range of products in network security are not just a revolution in sense of the particularity with which they always pick out malicious traffic, but it is the sheer accuracy, it is the sheer amount of threat intelligence that our single device produces. These numbers are absolutely unparalleled. We are a brand new technology, and as compared to just about any other security solution in the market, we don't look at our traffic based on signatures and behavior of the incoming malicious stream. We, on the other hand, in real time are capable of segregating bona fide and malified content in real time. This we are able to do without the availability of a pre-incident database, which means we are not dependent on an external source or the malware having come previously in order to identify it now. These are huge lacunae that we have been able to sort out in our product range, and we are so glad you guys could make it today to listen to this session. Today, I'll be talking about our enterprise range, our Nova 2.2.x range, but I'm not going to jump straight to the models. So let's spend some time and first understand why you need the WhiteLint solutions today. So let's continue this talk and go to our slides as well. Why the slides? Why am I making this academic? Well, largely because I wish to make this point more solidly to you trained gentlemen today. We need to establish how WhiteLint's solutions are indeed top of the line today and the need of every organization. So if you have a look at my screen, we are talking about WhiteLint's WAFER. WAFER is the world's first content-based network filtering solution. When I say content-based, I mean we are no longer dependent on the signature or behavioral characteristics that an IP or a bad IP may possess over the internet. We don't rate an incoming vector based on where it is coming from or whether or not its existence, there is existence of this bad IP in a previous database. On the other hand, we will treat every incoming vector based on its merit. Now, this merit is a highly complicated set of mathematical equations which have been indigenously developed here in India by myself. I am the developer, I am the inventor for this proprietary framework that we are calling WAFER. Now, why do we call it WAFER is another story which we'll get down to probably later on in this discussion or probably some other podcast that you can catch of mine. However, today we'll just be establishing why this technology is top of the line and is something that is missing from your network currently. Let's begin with these cyber attack trends, and they are rampant, and I don't need to stress more on them. But let's talk about why they are rampant. The latest villain amongst malware these days is a ransomware, and the reason a ransomware is so rampant today is because a lot of them are the same old viruses from 10 years ago, but they've all been repackaged. And since they've been repackaged, all of them contain new headers and new signatures. And these new headers and signatures are not available in any of the security databases. Since they're not available in any of the databases, your best of installations, Palo Alto, Fortinets, Forcepoints, CrowdStrikes, they all fail to recognize them. The biggest stat I want to talk about ransomware is not just the fact that people pay ransomware, around 70% of times if they get infected by it. There is around a 14% of percentage, a 14% of clients who are reinfected by the same ransomware, and then they end up repaying their ransom for the second time, because no matter what security measures they took, a repackaged ransomware still evaded their security solutions. No signature available, and no, and probably it was a fresh IP or a fresh source that was sending out that malware that day. All this began with this concept of surveillance capitalism. It's on my screen today. Surveillance capitalism as a concept was introduced by the big tech, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. These were the first names that started to use targeted marketing, and for that, their biggest weapon was this hidden vector that they would let on the cyberspace freely, and then this hidden vector would freely interact with any client's window-based system. This was this was a great plan, and I don't even mind sending my data to the big tech at all, because I know when my data is going to the big tech, it's landing in the world's most secured servers. However, it was this vector and this technology behind the vector that got leaked out of big tech. So then what really is WAFER? Like I said, it's a content-based network filtering framework. Imagine it is a bunch of mathematical equations which are fitted on the network interface card of an inline device which intercepts all your traffic before it reaches your critical system or router or a server at the data center, well, depending on what your need is. However, this program NIC, this mathematically charged NIC, is able to segregate an incoming stream in real time based on quick identification that it does without bringing any latency in your network and in real time. True, when this research began some 8 years back, it was only a hypothesis for me. However, today, now that it has been comprehensively tested and deployed at several places, we are observing an accuracy of 99.8% with known malware families. It's not just those 99.8% of accurate identifications that we are doing, we are also blocking them without causing any latency into your network, number one. And number two, at an average, we are producing approximately 700% extra results as compared to a Fortinet or a Palo Alto installation. And that alone sets us apart. That alone makes our method of filtering your network streams better than what anybody else has been doing thus far. So let's talk about what we've been able to achieve through this mathematical filter. I'll take you down an example. I'll give you an example again. We were talking about sentries at the start of this conversation, weren't we? So let's say I train a sentry, I place him at my gates, and I give him a photo album. I tell him there are 100 people who are going to try to forcibly enter the gates, and how are you supposed to identify them? I'm giving you a photo album with 100 pictures, and anytime any one of them shows up, you keep them out. Now this sentry is extremely well trained, it's extremely experienced, is as big as a Palo Alto is, and this sentry then is very precise in its detections. None of these 100 that are trying to come in will be allowed to get in, because almost seamlessly and with great accuracy my sentry will identify them based on their photographs. Now comes the next generation sentry. This next generation sentry is supposed to, or claims to, let's begin there, claims to being able to identify all of these 100 people who you want to keep out of your gates without the use of the photo album. The sentry believes he has some characteristics that he can pick out in real time and can keep out these 100 people. Now, since this is a next generation Sentry, I keep him at my gates, and I do find experimentally that he is 99.8, well, approximately 100% accurate in doing that without the use of a photo album. Now, in case there is a 101st intruder, in case there is a new intruder in town, I don't have a photograph for it, so my experienced Sentry is no longer able to keep him out of my gates. So if this 101st intruder tries to enter my gates, of course my experienced Sentry will fail because there is no picture of this guy in my photo album, in the photo album that I gave him. Take this photo album as the database and take this experienced Sentry as your best firewall installation. The 101st or the new intruder or the 0-day attack vector will remain undetected. Who do I trust now with this 101st intruder? I know the experienced guy will fail because the photograph is not available in the photo album. But this next generation Sentry, he was able to pick out all 100 of them without really looking at their photo album. Isn't he probabilistically better suited to find the 101st as well? Well, this is WAFER. That is how we are the only solution which is 0-day ready today. And ours is the solution that builds on the lacuna that exists in the cybersecurity market, where you have to address to future attack vectors today. So when we talk about the lacunae that WAFER technology fills in the cybersecurity space, we have these 12 points that are on your screen currently. What they're really telling you is that the dependence on the pre-incident database is now a thing of the past. Your ability to identify 0-day vectors is greatly enhanced, and you're able to also regulate big tech into your infrastructure if you're talking about critical infrastructures. We worked with public sector banks and government infrastructures here in India already. We found a strange demand that they had here in our country. They were okay with Google, but they wanted to keep out the likes of Amazon and Facebook, especially from their critical servers. Now, it's not a wavered demand. It's not an ostentatious demand at all. And WAFER actually gives you the ability of regulating big tech vectors through technological control now, and not just in policy anymore like we used to previously. Since we look at incoming traffic and try to determine the malicious nature of streams in real time, we don't really base our identification on sources or the origin IPs of these incoming vectors. Therefore, if a marketing snoop is trying to, it may be harmless, but if it is trying to pick up some user data or some search data without user permission from my browser, now technically that is a malware characteristic, isn't it? Obviously, none of the commercial installations will ever point them out because they would check the source, and if they know that a vector belongs to either Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple or Microsoft, of course these would be allowed to go through. We, on the other hand, do have a built-in zero trust network mode as well. In the zero trust network mode, we can see Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon and Apple vectors coming into your network and give you the power to keep whichever one you want out. Now, this is an extremely rare phenomena, and we don't really want Google and Amazon and Facebook to be against us. However, we do understand that if a critical infrastructure holding organization, or let's say the financial sector, the BFSI sector, they place such a demand in the near future that may not be the most ostentatious. Their user data will still be available for big tech to utilize. However, their office PCs and their office data would be absolutely safe and in a distant sterile network. Now, this sterility And this distance, this air gapping, this technological air gapping, not a physical air gap anymore, this can only be brought into your network through a device such as our wafer-based installations. Having said that, let's straight away go to our product line now. Our product line is unique, based around the WAFER proprietary framework. By the way, our Indian and American patents have both been granted for this framework now. So, for the proprietary framework, around the proprietary framework, we built these range of IPS and IDS solutions that can be deployed as sensors at various places in the network. Since this was a concept that was based on capturing the entire traffic and then beginning the segregation from the NIC, obviously the entire, all the solutions have to be in line. And if they need to be in line, then throughput becomes a huge factor. Since we've built these solutions and these product prototypes from scratch in our own laboratory since the last 3 years, of course we perfected them now, we know that we scaled the entire concept based on throughputs. Our first installation was called 2.1.1, where we were doing high-grade deep packet inspection based calculations at our NIC, but our device was only Raspberry Pi based. This was 2.1.1, which is meant for an endpoint. It can cater to throughputs of up to 200 Mbits and is suitable for one system only. Causes no latency, however, it is good for your endpoint, and you can segregate an endpoint entirely from either the rest of the network or protect a segregated endpoint with enterprise-grade security. Our biggest seller is 2.1.2. Nova range is the range of our IPS solutions, and 2.1 range goes to personal and small-time computing. It is the 2.2 range which talks about enterprise solutions. In a different talk, I've spoken about 2.1.2 at length and how it can be deployed at your domestic router with relative ease. In a 15-minute video, I guess, I could explain the concept and the installation of that device in your home network previously. But it is the 2.2.x range which will really revolutionize how organizational networks are built. Now, this 2.2.x range of Nova IPS devices, you see a couple of those variants on your screen here. They cater to throughputs of 10 Gbits, 40 Gbits, and even 100 Gbits with the 2.2.5. It receives an optic in, and it's a giant horizontal server that lays besides your data center servers and occupies this place, occupies its place in the network. Let's see what place then first. Let me take you to the next slide and show you a routine network diagram. Now, all these various Nova nomenclature that you see inside the network are various positions where I can fit in various models, and according to how many computers or how many systems or how much throughput is being expected at that point. Now, we recommend the 2.2.x range for as a cyber fortification solution. We recommend this as a fortification solution to be placed before your firewall. So yes, if it is multi-layered protocol based architecture and you're receiving multiple public IPs as your input from your service provider, then we recommend that you place the Nova 2.2. Any variant of the Nova 2.2.x based on the size of your network right after the service provider's input. Now, routinely there may be a splitter that's available here because routinely a lot of organizations go for 2 different service providers at the same time. In that case, we recommend 2 different units for 2 different service providers being deployed before the firewall. Now, in a routine MPLS architecture, you will get anywhere from 8 to 32 to 64 and one of our clients boasted of 225 IPs in the 256 IPs, I'm sorry, in the entire octet that they were, in the entire band that they were receiving from the service provider. Now, big organizations do have multiple public IPs as their input, and each of our device is capable of handling 64 public IPs in real time. Our 100 Gbit device is capable of handling 64 public IPs as an input. Our 40 Gbits device is also capable of handling 32 public IPs as their input in one go in the MPLS architecture. However, in the most convenient SD-WAN architecture of the modern times, there is only one public IP that becomes an input. Our device, 10 Gbits, 40 Gbits or 100 Gbits based on the size of your network, will again be deployed right after the service provider's input and will take in that public IP. All the traffic is now going to pass through our filter, and we give another input IP to your firewall. Now, you may have a 5-layer architecture for security, and you may have a 7-star security architecture in your environment. However, if you wish to deploy the WAFER Nova 2.2.x device as a fortification solution in your network, you can seamlessly do this deployment within 24 to 48 hours, provided you are ready to change that one input IP into your firewall. And how long does that interface allow you to do it? Once that is done, no other mapping is required for any further down your network, and whatever 7 layers you have can go undisturbed. Now, why would you buy something new if nothing is getting replaced? Well, that's why we named it WAFER, because we could see that in terms of results, it was better than a WAF. It was covering everything that EDRs, XDRs and NDRs could do. And at the fortification point before a firewall, it could also do away with an anti-DDoS solution. Now, the anti-DDoS solution or the XDR, NDR, EDR or the WAF, they all look at specific kind of vectors. But since our inline filter is based in layer 3, there is no distinction for what application and incoming vector is being invited by. There is no restriction on if there is no, if the virus or the malware is free to invite just about any vector over the cyberspace, they'll all be filtered in the same way by our layer 3 filter. And therefore, we can outdo these 4 licenses and replace them in a green network. In fact, the biggest auditing companies, after testing us, have now highly recommended us for any green network. By the way, in terms of pricing, we are around 16 times cheaper than your Palo Alto installation. We have a lot of control over customization as well, since we are doing the hardware and the software all in-house. And all our cloud portals are also extremely customizable for your threat intelligence needs. Right, with this feature-packed product line that I've just shared with you, what are the advantages? And again, reinstating the point, why do you need these WAFER installations in your network now? Why would you go away from your routine vendors who've been giving you good service, I'm sure, but the security that your network has been getting has been missing out. What WAFER installations bring to your network is pure security. We don't want to replace firewalls. We don't ask you to replace your firewalls, because we are not dealing with network management at all. We are not a network management device at all. We augment your security. We don't just augment it, we take this the concept of fortification to another level. Again, let me reinstate that with an example. So let's see this in the light of the country where I belong to. In India, we get a lot of snoops, state-sponsored attack vectors from both China and Pakistan. They are both not on very friendly terms with our governments since decades now. Well, anytime an attack begins, we know this. We saw this in the case of Ukraine and Russia. All wars, they'll begin from the cyber path. It benefits the Chinese government more if they can bring down a critical infrastructure like a power grid, which they did in our country last year, as compared to, I don't know, fighting on a front today. And that just does make a lot of sense. In fact, the Chinese government has had a sustained economic plan built around trying to steal data from users in the enemy territory. Sometimes this is research-based data, and that is why the Chinese always come up with a new technology, because they've stolen that technology from their enemy states' users. Well, keeping this in mind, our government had taken stern steps. We have an exceptional cert in our country. As per these stern steps, the government geo-fenced all IPs emanating out of Pakistan and China and kept them out of our cyberspace. However, there were several unknown IP addresses that they could not geo-fence. Now, from belonging to Pakistan telecom servers and Chinese telecom servers that were detected when we placed our device, at the head of critical infrastructures here. In fact, that was a breakthrough moment, and we could give all of this intel to our governments, and then they could, take better steps to keep these things out, these two countries out. However, let's continue with the example of the fortification of how we take it to the next level. Now, Pakistan and China are things that they knew of, so they could geo-fence them through their firewall. What about, let's say, a country like Kazakhstan? Now, Kazakhstan, there is no history that we have with them, so we're not expecting them to send in any, data harnessing snoops anymore. However, what happens if they start doing that suddenly tomorrow? Now, until these snoops are observed, a policy around them, around Kazakhstan and how to use them and their snoops cannot be made by the governments. And what happens in the time that is spent to come up with this policy to deal with Kazakhstan and its snoops? What happens during that time? If down the line we decide to keep Kazakhstan out of our cyberspaces, does that mean that the 2 months that were spent in coming up with the policy were a waste, and all the snoops that came in those 2 months are now acceptable by my infrastructure? What if they are more harmful than just a port scanning vector or just an initial vector? Now there comes the problem. Take this same problem, same example of Kazakhstan over China and Pakistan, or a third party data collector coming into your cyberspace without your knowledge. Take this to the corporate space, where we actually find third party data collectors out there looking for spurious data leakages from your network. And just about any entry point into your network will allow them to stay in. If they are not detected and a policy is not made for them, what happens to these vectors? They still are in there, they are still causing havoc, they are still causing menace for you, and there is there is nothing more you can do about it now, since the policy has taken shape, well, 2 months after they first started to come into your cyberspace. If you have a cyber fortification solution which is basing its identification not on the source or not on a previous database, but truly on the nature of the incoming vector, this fortress will keep everything out. It will produce threat intelligence of previously unknown or unseen vectors for you. It will give you a reason to draft your policy, and in the time you take to draft your policy, it has your back. This fortress has your back. And that is why you need a WAFER Nova IPS in your system today. What has been showing on my screen thus far is Well, the difference between signature and behavior-based solutions and the wafer-based solutions that we have introduced, if you look at the area under the curve, the first curve in blue is represented, is the number of various vectors per family, per known family, that a signature and behavior based solution can pick out. As a result, the area under the curve between the x and y axis is representative of the security that it brings to your network. A wafer-based solution obviously will pick up everything that the signature and behavior-based solutions are picking up. In addition, there are those 700% extra vectors that you see on the right side of that graph. Not just that, but the 250 times extra number of vectors of known families that a wafer installation picks up tremendously increases the area under the graph and the amount of security it can thus impart to your given network. We've discussed how just about any network type gets covered. We've discussed how any number of public IPs that you need inputted into, you need as an input in your network can be accommodated by our devices. And I've stressed tremendously on, how superior this mathematical filter really is from everything that was existent thus far in the market. I encourage you to get a POC device. The easiest way of comparing my filter to the filter that your regulation installations are presenting to you is to take an IDS solution. We guys call it WaferSense Sense 1.0. You take an IDS solution, which is again Raspberry Pi based. Place this detection solution on any L2 port in your network. Place it in parallel to your Fortinets, I believe, for best results. And within a day, within 24 hours, the sheer number of bad IPs that we pick up will prove my case and point. We encourage you to begin these POC exercises. We want them with us today. They are available on demand. Our channels are constantly out there ensuring that you get the best of experience. We are a new company and we are a new product indeed, but we've spent countless hours now building our channels and ensuring that each and every customer of ours gets that individual attention that their network so deserves. We provide state-of-the-art training in threat intelligence and threat intelligence generation systems which take input from our sensors, and we can design an entire SOC for you in-house as well. And these elaborate training exercises can enable your own network administrators and your security professional to make the hard decision, to make the hard decisions when it comes to cybersecurity. We are not probabilistic in nature, so we will never produce a percentage score for you regarding a vector. We will never hide the public IP from you. We are in layer 3. We will always give you the public IP of the origin server. We will teach your SOC and your network security professionals to the extent that they can decide as to what vendor is allowed inside their network, even if that vendor is only there to pick up your marketing data. That's the amount of sterility, that's the amount of protection against any known malware that we can provide today to you. And the lacunae that we fill in a cybersecurity space are unparalleled. And you need a wafer solution for your network today. We are the only ones who have your back, and we are the only ones who are flawless doing that. Happy surfing.